Hello, friend. Welcome to this week's episode of the Remarkable People podcast, the David Steele story. This week, David and I had a great time talking with one another. We got to learn about his upbringing, his trials and struggles, just like we all have, how they bled into his adult life. We talk about how success without purpose means nothing. We talk about tenacity. We talk about entrepreneurship. We talk about debt versus capital. We talk about his financial planning business and experience. We talk about how he has a successful chain of restaurants. And the whole time, you and I can glean and be inspired. There's amazing quotes that you can get from this that you can apply to your life as well, and so much more. I really believe that when you stick with us for the next few minutes, you're not only going to be entertained, but you're going to be inspired and you're going to be given some helpful steps to say, yeah, this is what I need to do. And I'm going to be a better human and take my life to the next level. So at this time, get your pen, paper, favorite beverage, and get ready to take notes on our friend David Steele and his remarkable experience now.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.
Hey, David, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Man, I am fantastic, remarkable even. I just spent about 30 to 60 seconds telling our audience about who you are and what to expect, but straight from the source. If our listeners are their first time here today, or if they've been with us all 7 years, what are you going to share with us in a nutshell that's going to not only highlight your life, but something that our listeners can take and run with to better theirs?
The only way to be happy in life is to be in the service of others.
Yeah, I mean, that is so true. The Bible says, love God and love others as thyself, right? So we're going to talk about your upbringing. We're going to talk about the steps that you took, good, bad, ugly, pretty ugly, to get where you are today. And then we'll transition to where David is and where he's headed next, right after the short commercial break.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our biggest 3-in-1 sale ever with a limited edition product, a back in stock special, and a closeout deal you won't find anywhere else. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get our MyPillow bed sheets only $29.88. Any color, any style, any size, even kings, regular $119.98, only $29.88. Once they're gone for good. How about our My Towels? They're finally back in stock, but not for long. Get a 6-piece My Towel set, regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And for the first time and the only time ever, get our limited edition premium My Pillows. They're made with Giza cotton and designer gusset. Queen $17.98, Kings only $19.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get the best offers ever. Quantities are extremely limited, so order now.
All right, welcome back to the show. David, we're talking about service to others. Talk about your life. Where did your life begin? What was your upbringing life? Not because we're trying to dwell on the past, but everything that happens, again, good, bad, ugly, pretty, or pretty ugly, makes us the men we are. So what was your upbringing like that made this concept so important to you?
Well, my overriding philosophy in life, which again, you asked me to sort of summarize what I hope to express to people, really was taught to me by my mother. And I was raised in pretty difficult circumstances. I don't have much of an actual memory from before I was 8 or 9 years old. My mom woke up one day at the age of 30, having not finished college, having my father essentially leave her And my brother and I was 9, and my brother was 3. And the situation was pretty sad. I mean, I had said earlier that if you're not going to be happy if you're not in the service of others. It's really hard to be in the service of others if you're not, as I like to say, warm, dry, and fed. In other words, your base needs aren't being met, or you're at least you have anxiety around whether your base needs are going to be met. And so that that idea of being in the service of others in the name of trying to have peace and happiness for yourself internally really is only possible once you have your base needs being met. You know you're going to be safe. And we didn't know we were going to be safe. My mom ended up, father he didn't disappear, but he was not supportive very much financially. And my mom found herself having to finish college, and she got a job as a teacher. And I think she was making something like $17,000 a year in the 70s. So, adjusted for inflation, it's still not a lot,
Yeah, it's
and but we survived, and so to call us poor is probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but we were pretty darn close. I think at one point we actually qualified for food stamps, and my mom was too proud to. My recollection of the story, she was too proud to take them, so we never actually accepted them. But that sort of gives you a sense of the context by which I, at 9 years old, was trying to find my way. I was a Jewish kid from a divorced household, being raised in a neighborhood full of a bunch of Italian American Catholics there were no divorces, and they were all upper middle class because their parents, although it was kind of a blue collar town, but they were all pretty successful blue collar people. So they had a lot more money than we had. So I was poor, Jewish. I was pretty much the only Jew I knew, or there was only a few of us. Divorced when nobody was divorced, and I really felt like an outcast. And I was a very sensitive kid. And so I was easy. I got a lot of fights as a result of that. Sensitive kids get picked on all the time because the other kids get reaction from them. And that really, I guess, toughened me, hardened me. That's probably the right word. It's interesting that I don't have much of a memory other than when I think of things that I really think are from photos prior to my dad leaving, which is, at the age of 9, that's too old. You should have memories earlier than that. Of course, I have some, but not many. It's way less than I think the average person does.
yeah, and that's interesting because there's a whole psychology that nobody fully understands. You have people who are, they're hurting and they just go blank. And some people consciously and subconsciously repress memories. But I know people that they've gone through a traumatic situation and they themselves, let's say, spoke to a counselor and everything was recorded out of their mouth. And then a few years later, their mind was like rewritten and it's completely different. So it is amazing how we can protect ourselves and compartmentalize. So it's not uncommon to hear that somebody doesn't have memories before 9 when their parents went through a divorce, especially in our generation when there wasn't a lot of divorces, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly these days it's more common, right?
Yeah. And what area of the country did you grow up in, did you say?
Right outside of Philadelphia. I was born in Princeton, New Jersey, but we quickly moved. We moved around a bunch. My father was trying to get a tenured position as a professor at a university. He ultimately did a university in Philly, and we had moved back to Philly and then to South Jersey. I was mostly raised a few miles outside of Philadelphia in southern New Jersey.
And did he ever come by and visit you or hang out, or did he
Yeah,
just leave?
and I mean, I now know my closet psychologist has learned that my father has a lot of social anxiety and is very mistrusting. I think he was probably traumatized some way as a young child, and he does. I do remember this. I said, "Daddy, why don't you have any friends?" And he said, "Son, when men get older, they don't have friends." He said that to a young child. So he was pretty damaged himself. But you asked me, was he around? I mean, when he did the required, the socially required every other weekend type of thing for a while, but his heart, I don't believe his heart was really in it. And the evidence of that is over time, it became a lot less frequent. I would imagine his memory is that I didn't want to see him or I wasn't available. And, I'm not sure what the truth is with that. But the bottom line is we ever increasingly saw less of each other.
Yeah, and that affects us. Maybe it hurts when we're teens, but then as we get into adulthood, we don't realize the, I don't want to say boundaries, but the walls we build to protect ourselves, they're actually unhealthy. So go through their life. You're in school, your mom's a single mom, you're getting by. But like you said, you're the only Jewish kid you know, and you're in an Italian American neighborhood. I grew up in an Italian American neighborhood in Portuguese. So, I mean, to me, it was easy because my last name is Pasqualone. But were you pretty accepted? Was it
No,
hostile?
no, I mean, it wasn't, yeah, I guess it was kind of hostile. I got in a lot of fights,
Yeah.
I didn't really get in fights once the latter years of high school was around. I was not, I wanted to be a great athlete. Ended up being a very good tennis player. I was the number one tennis player in my high school. And I really wanted to be a great basketball and baseball player. I was simply a decent baseball player and not good basketball player. Those are what I wanted to be, probably because that's what the popular kids played. Of course, I was good at tennis, and so I was even more of an outcast. There was no tennis. Tennis was not big in my school. But school was rough for me, man. I don't have any friends left. My best friend since I was 9 years old, we met in Hebrew school, and to the extent that I've experienced love at first sight, it's with my best buddy Frank, and we met at age 9 in Hebrew school, and he is really my only relationship other than my brother, other than family from pre-college.
Yeah.
So I think it's just because it was it was certainly a challenging time for me, and some of it was traumatic.
Yeah. So before we move on to, let's say, graduating from high school and going on to whether it's college or the career field, is there anything else significant that's going to, I don't know whether it's program you for the future or whether it's going to influence your mindset for the future? Is there anything else significant between your birth and, let's say, high school graduation that we missed before we move forward?
I had a old business partner that I had told that I got cut from my high school basketball team 4 years in a row.
Mm.
And that damn coach, I mean, come on. By my senior year, for crying out loud, he couldn't put me at the end of the bench. But no, he couldn't. I guess I was that bad. But he said, man, that says a lot more about your personality that you kept trying than, pretty much anything, any other story you could tell. And I think that was actually pretty big. That was the beginnings of me being, I wouldn't say disciplined, but I'd say tenacious. And tenacity is a theme that I think will come up again as we talk.
Well, and let's go on. So now, when you finish school, I personally hated school. I love learning. I love people. I love God. But man, I hated school, dreaded it. Is that how you were in high school, or did you have some kind of okay balance, or did you just loathe it like I did?
I loathed it like you did, and I did really poorly on my SATs. I think I got a 900. I think I got 600 verbal and 300 math. That's how bad I was at math, which people were shocked to hear because you'll hear later in our conversation, I've built a financial planning company that's been, that's wildly successful by any measure. And you'd think I would be great at math, but I'm not good at that type of math, that formulaic, precise, exact math. And the way school was set up is you had requirements, and I didn't really enjoy very many of the requirements. And then when I got to college, I went to Temple University for my undergraduate in Philadelphia and got a degree in business. And I can't honestly say I loved any of the coursework. I didn't despise it as much as I despised high school. So my brain, I guess, started to catch up, or my emotions maybe started to catch up with my brain. I'm not sure. So I was able to apply myself and struggled a lot less. And my last 2 years of school, I had almost a 4.0 GPA. In college, having about a 2.0 GPA in my first 2 years. So I think I graduated with a 3.0, but not, but it really took me a while to figure it out. I will say it took me 5.5 years to get my undergraduate degree. And I then chose in my 30s to get a master's in literature, specifically focusing on postmodern philosophy as it applies to literature, which sounds pretty hoity-toity. And I loved it. And I did that intentionally. So clearly I love learning and clearly I don't hate school, but I think it really it requires somebody like me would have required me really being honest about my capabilities and what I desired, and I wasn't doing that in high school and college.
Yes, and we were in a different generation and world than today. When we grew up, it's like you're a loser if you don't go to college, which wasn't the case, but that's what we're pushed to think. So it's almost like if you don't go to college, you felt less of yourself. But then it's like, well, what am I even going to college for? Especially guys like us who hated school. So when you went to college, were you going to just get the degree, or did you know what you wanted to do?
No, I didn't. And in fact, I got a degree in business. And if I'm being honest, I now, as a person who's been entrepreneur and started several companies successfully, I realize upon reflection that I didn't know anything about business in college, even while I was doing my studies. I learned nothing about it. I I mentioned my financial planning company, which I still am founder and CEO of. I That exists because I didn't want to be poor ever again. And I went to the library and I looked up my senior year of college when I knew I was going to graduate. I looked up and I I looked for the job that paid the most for a 4-year degree, and it said stockbroker. And so I said, okay, I'm going to become a stockbroker. So I'm glad I went to college because I couldn't have gotten that job out of school without without a college degree. They probably wouldn't have hired me. And I hated being a stockbroker, and we can unpack that a little bit. But I made money, and so that was the beginnings of when I'm like realization that one has to be in the service of others, or they're not going to be happy. And as a stockbroker, I was a parasite. No, I was a salesperson. I was not in the service of others. And I turned that into what is now a financial planning company. And we very much know we are in the service of others and feel it every day. But that's a long answer to your question. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I went to college. And even I didn't really want to become a stockbroker when I came out of college. It was just I didn't want to be poor.
Yeah, I can understand that. And I'm sure many of our listeners all around the world, some cultures you're born into your position and you're stuck is what the culture tells you. But within America, we have so many freedoms that people just piss away and waste and complain about, but we can do whatever. So it's really a privilege. So now you go to college, you get out, you become a stockbroker, and from everybody I've talked to, that is a grind. So talk about how are you feeling about yourself and your life, and what did you learn from that?
Man, I learned the single greatest lesson any business person could ever learn, and probably anybody that ever wants to do anything and accomplish anything could learn. And that's where I took my natural tenacity and turned it in and added discipline to it. And so I worked at a company where it was very much like Wolf of Wall Street, if you've ever seen that movie.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, it
I
wasn't
don't know if I watched it straight through, but it was one
Mhm.
of those movies that's always on, so I saw bits and pieces at different time. Leonardo DiCaprio.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the firm I worked for was a company called DH Blair, and it was sort of a junior version of the company that was featured in that movie. And so we were actually all aware of this guy Jordan Belfort, who was at that company. Jordan being the character in Wolf of Wall Street. And there was this framework for how to build a business, and the framework was make 500 dials a day. This is when you were handed essentially a phone book and a desk and a telephone. And I had a sheet put in front of me that had 500 numbers, 1 through 500, and then 1 through 100 below that, and 1 through 20 below that. So three sets of numbers. I didn't leave the office in a day until I had dialed the phone 500 times. If I didn't get through, that still counted. I found statistically that I would talk on average to about 70 people if I dialed the phone 500 times. And if I
Did you say
talked to
70, 70?
70 people per day.
That's a lot of calls.
Well, some of them said F off and hung up the phone. Still I talked to somebody. And some of them were not qualified or not interested. But there were some that were qualified and interested, and I found that number to be 10 per day. So if I dialed the phone 500 times, on average, very much average, sometimes there'd be two, sometimes there'd be 20, but on average, I'd get 10 qualified leads. And once I had enough qualified leads, let's call it 100, I could then call and set up meetings to go meet with people, coffee, pitch them on something, whatever. And now if I knew if I got off eventually 100 pitches, I'd get a client. So you could easily see I'd have to have, for every 100 leads, I'd have one client. Well, I was okay with that math. It doesn't sound great, but now I knew my formula. And I knew if I dialed the phone 500 times a day and if I got up a certain number of pitches per week and so forth, and if I was good to my clients, I wouldn't, now all of a sudden I've got the beginnings of a business. And that framework, I'll call that systematic behavior, formulaic, mathematical, systematic behavior, I think applies to everything we do in life. I bet you every professional athlete has some version of that for their training. And I don't care what kind of business person, maybe it doesn't really matter whatever the discipline is. If you have a mathematical framework and you can chip away at it low and slow, but consistently, you can succeed. And so that was the beginning. I wish I had that framework for making the basketball team back in high school. I tried out for 4 years, but I probably didn't have the daily training necessary to have actually made it. But anyhow.
Yeah, and that's what's hard in our culture too, because there's things we love, but it doesn't mean we're the best at. And there's things we're really good at, but that doesn't mean we enjoy it either. So we always, whether it's our personal life or our professional life, we got to find that balance. And I'd make jokes in the past in my career, and I'm sure you did too. It's like, well, I'd rather be rich and miserable than poor and miserable, right? So that's a terrible mentality. But when you feel stuck in your career, you're like, well, I want to make as much money as I can. So now it sounds like you're having the discipline, you're systematically seeing for 500 calls, I get 2%. Out of that 2%, I get 1%. So it's all math. You're dialing for dollars. At what point did you just say, whoa, something's going to change here? Was it 6 months in, 6 years in? How far did you go before you're like, I can't do this anymore?
The system at this, what turned out to be a pretty crappy firm, was once you open 30 accounts with clients for the person who was mentoring you, they were the clients of the mentor, not my clients. So they were in essence paying me and teaching me, and I was opening, in return, I was opening accounts or developing relationships with clients that they kept. Once you hit 30, you went on your own and you began that same process for yourself. And I set the record in 9 months. I was able to go from being hired to passing my securities test to opening 30 accounts with clients. I was a very good salesperson. And I was very disciplined and systematic. So I was on my own, and I remember it was 1991, and I went from making $12,000 a year to over $100,000. And I about a year into it, I was really unhappy. Even though I was, you just said it a minute ago, rather be rich and unhappy than poor and unhappy. Listen, if that's the binary, which I'll reject, but if that's the binary, I agree with you, because at least your base needs are being met. So at least you may be miserable and safe rather than miserable and potentially unsafe. So I'll take that. But the idea is to be happy, and rich is not necessarily part of the equation by my
Oh,
estimation.
yeah. And our listeners know, and I want to clarify if I misspoke. I mean, we want to be in love with God, in love with our family, have balance, have joy, have peace, and to be at one with God and our family and have peace. You can be in poverty or you can have great wealth and you're going to be okay. But what I was saying is that daily grind of going to work, it's like, okay, well, if I'm going to be miserably either way, I might as well make as much money as I can per hour.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all right. So now you're going on, you hit this record, you're blowing away the competition. Where do you go from there?
Well, like I said, I started to make money and I wasn't happy. And I figured, I was like, what the heck is going on here? Like, this is weird. I'm no longer probably ever going to be worried about whether I can feed myself or be able to have an apartment. What's going on? And I'll condense a couple of year transition process into a very quick sort of paragraph, but I, I realized that I wasn't adding value to people's lives, and I knew it. I was really selling them investments that were not fully baked, that were, listen, I didn't have a morality question because I didn't know I was sociopathically selling something to somebody that was wrong for them. That's not what I mean. I just know that this was not a process that I believed was helping people. It was most probably appealing to their gambling instinct, which a lot of people, I think, are born with. I think we're all born to some degree with the excitement of gambling. And I think in retrospect, I was selling people investments that really in their brains fit with gambling. Them wanting to win and, hopefully not lose rather than providing a service. And so I was contemplating leaving the industry and I was thinking about going to real estate. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I couldn't keep doing it the way I was doing it. And I stumbled upon this field, which was not brand new in the 90s, but certainly not prevalent. That was fee-based fiduciary like financial planning or investment advisory work rather than stockbroker selling people stuff for a commission. And again, I'm condensing part of the story into a simple paragraph, but I went to work for a real firm, and people will laugh when they hear the name because during the credit crisis, they got in trouble, and now they're thought of as being a bad firm. But truthfully, it was a wonderful firm called Bear Stearns, and I was so happy there. And I was the first advisor in the entire company of 500 advisors to convert my business to a fee-based fiduciary like investment advisory practice. And my income dropped 70%. And I was happy making 70% less income because every time I talked to somebody, I knew I was helping them every time. And my brother joined me. I was able to convince the branch manager to let him get hired and eventually became my full-time assistant. And he and I began building what is now a pretty successful financial planning company, but we did it one client at a time together.
That's awesome. I always thought it'd be fantastic to have a business with your siblings or your children. I'm sure there's challenges with it, but there's also benefits. So now, during this time, did you get married, have children? Have you been single the whole time? What has been going on in your personal life while this evolution is happening in your professional life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's psychoanalytic rich territory to unpack why I knew at 14 I didn't want to have kids. It doesn't take too much it's not too much of a leap to figure out why, see above my earlier story about my childhood. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Who knows? I knew I didn't want kids. And I knew I never wanted to get married. Again, not too far of a stretch to figure out why that might have been.
Mhm.
But I did in when I was 30, I So I fast forwarded a little bit there. I was single up until then, and I was with a woman as a true partner, domestic partner for 9 years from 30 to 39. And she didn't want marriage or kids either. And so we just cohabitated and built a life together. We ended up breaking up, unfortunately, and I've been essentially single ever since. But yeah, that's a long answer to your question.
No, not at all. I've thought this my whole life, but just this week I was speaking with a friend about how divorce is taken so flippantly. And in America, especially, it's common. It doesn't matter if you're within the church or if you don't go to church. It's just like, hey, this isn't working out, so we're just going to get a divorce. And I truly believe that no matter who you are, it leaves massive scars on the individuals. And more so, the children didn't choose it. It leaves massive scars on the children. So I think the sanctity of marriage is huge. And this is a guy, I got divorced. I fought for my marriage for 24 years and it still ended badly. But
Are you married now?
no,
You're
no.
saying you're single now? Okay. You
Yeah.
have
So
kids?
once
You have kids? You do have kids?
I have two children who are not children, they're 23 and 21 right now.
Mhm.
So,
Right on.
but it's tough,
Congratulations.
man. It's like everything that God ordained, we have peace and joy and the way it quote unquote should be. When that gets broken, it breaks you, it breaks the children, it breaks the whole structure. So Satan uses that to steal the joy. So I can totally understand. I'm not judging you.
Yeah, no, I don't feel judged at all. And
Yeah.
listen, I spent a lot of years in therapy trying to kind of figure this out. And I've since just accepted that I'm in love with my life. I'm at peace. I'm happy and I'm imperfect. And that's just okay, and the why some of those whys may never be answered. But I did want to, you had said people could divorce in too flippant a way. And I completely agree with you. But let me just tell you, I think people get married in too flippant a way. I mean,
Yes.
it's
100%.
the most important contract. You're going to, I'm coming at it from a financial planning perspective. I see people enter into marriages and they hear the word prenup, and I think it needs a new name. I think you need to call it something along the lines of an agreement, a marriage agreement. I mean, we could maybe positively connote it and call it a marriage agreement. Let's talk about what we plan for our marriage and what we plan if our marriage doesn't work. And let's actually get that out on paper because it's the most important contract you're going to sign in your life. And people go and sign it without any analysis or thought, just because they feel this emotion.
Yeah.
So
No, I
just
agree. I mean, there's so much we can go dig deep in this, right? But you have two people, which throughout history, people, when you get married, you're typically young and you don't know a lot, but you're in this feeling. But our elders and the people around us, we're supposed to instruct our children. But when that family's broken, like you and I, we had a broken family. So then when we're going into marriage, we don't even know what a good model is. You know what I mean? We don't see it. I didn't see a good marriage around us, when I was growing up. So I didn't even know what a good relationship was. And what you're saying is people going flippantly because of an emotion. And then you can look at it exactly like you were saying from a financial perspective. There's huge consequences to divorce, right? But coming at it from a Christian worldview, there is not even divorce. It shouldn't even be an option because I'm not making the vow just to my spouse. I'm making it to God. So for me, divorce was the last thing I wanted. And in biblical terms, I believe there's only one. I personally believe, again, I'm not, if you got divorced 10 times, I'm not telling you, you're burning in hell. That's between you and God. But what I'm saying is, I believe the only reason for divorce biblically is adultery. And even then, you try to fight for the marriage. So I had the biblical out. But man, it ruined me. It ruined the relationship between my children and I. And it just, who knows how many generations that can influence without God's intervention. So when you're talking about seeing it from the financial perspective, I mean, how many men and women do we know they're in their 40s, they get divorced and they literally have less money than when they were in college, right?
it's a mess. And from as a financial planner, I have seen people with more than enough wealth for their grandkids to never worry. And the divorce happens, the trauma emotionally on both parties, and not to mention the kids, and the amount of money 99 out of 100 times that ends up in the lawyer's pockets because they are motivated to have you fight. And they will make you feel like they're on your side. Your lawyer's on your team, and your lawyer has your best interest in mind. And your spouse's lawyers on your spouse's side, and they will do the same thing, but they subconsciously, at best, will want to see the fight extend and be as deadly as possible.
No, and that's true. Anybody who knows me, I've said that before. I said that during, and I'll say that for the rest of my life because it's true. The only people who win from divorce are Satan and the attorneys. Our legal system, especially in America, is completely backwards. It's not about right, it's about exploiting both parties, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to exhaust you financially. When I went into my divorce, David, I refused to use an attorney. I'm like, I'm going to do the right thing, and that's it. And if our system doesn't protect me for doing the right thing, God's going to take care of me in the end. And he did. I went through the process, and you know what happened in my divorce? I don't know what state you're in, but different
California.
rules. Huh?
I'm in California.
You're in California. So the average divorce takes X months, sometimes years, right? Once we filed for divorce, we were done in 2 to 2.5 months because I didn't
Wow.
get an attorney. And
So, do you still have a relationship with your ex?
no, she was no, 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 no.
You might want
My
to edit that. You might
relationship,
want to edit the beginning of that out,
oh, no, I don't even care.
huh?
Truth is the truth. My relationship was basically the Jerry Springer show meets the Good Son meets the Twilight Zone. And she was a gaslighting narcissist that manipulated everything, even messed my own kids' heads up. I'll take a polygraph today. And when I face God, I got a clear conscience. But she's hurt me and the relationship between my children and I a lot. Now, other people, I could care less what they think of me. If they want to believe a lie, they should have the discernment. I could care less. But when it goes back to the courts, I had her attorney on the phone and I'm like, we could go in the whole story, but I just basically said, hey, you're speaking lies. I'm not going to waste my time with you. I'm certainly not paying for you. And if you want to, this is what I'm willing to do. If not, you do what you got to do. And then he ended up hearing what I had to say, seeing that my ex wasn't telling him the truth. So it was just like, this is what he's going to do, or we go to court. And I was just like, you want to give all your money to the attorney, or you want to actually have something to exploit me by? So it was like, you want to put the money in your pocket, or you want to let the attorney put it in his pocket? And that's how I handled it. But the attorney commented, and the courts, the freaking judge said, I've never seen a divorce go so fast. But that's because I refuse to use one. So what you're saying and what you see every day is, as a Christian, I do believe in the sanctity of marriage. And I do believe people can love God and love each other and stay married a lifetime. But statistically, man, there's like what, a 60% divorce rate in America right now. So it's kind of hard to say get a prenup, but using earthly wisdom, I'm like, yeah, prenup's smart, right? So
Let's call it something different. Let's change the because prenup is negatively connoted.
yeah,
Let's call it something more positively connoted, and let's plan for what our marriage will be like. And if God forbid our marriage doesn't work, what it's going to be like and how we're going to agree to end our marriage.
yeah. I mean, contracts are only as good as the people who make them, right? The only thing you have is if you have something that's legally enforceable, just to put boundaries and guidelines. But yeah, I can understand that perspective completely. I'm not going to say I'm right or you're right, or I'm wrong or you're wrong. I don't even know anymore what the right thing is, other than when we make a vow to God, we keep it, right? So with you, though, you're seeing this every day. So that further must, like, you already had, what you learned in childhood. And now every single day you're seeing marriages go south and wealth be destroyed. I mean, I can't imagine you not having reinforced you don't want to get married. So
Yeah, yeah. I
as
love
you're,
people, by the way, though. I have so many people in my life that I love, that I have deep, long, lifelong relationships with. And I get a lot of what I think. And again, I never, I didn't want kids, which I mentioned. And therefore, it wasn't like I had to be married to protect sort of the family unit, right?
yeah.
But I never thought about whether early on when I was in finance, seeing the mess that divorce caused. I wonder if, maybe that was just the period of the end of the sentence for me. I was, my predilection was to not get married, but then it was like, there's no way after seeing what people go through.
Yeah, and all of us, we have to be honest with ourselves and with God. And for you, your story is different than mine, but there could be a lot of similarities. But I think just human nature across the board, even if you're on the fence, when you're seeing disaster after disaster financially, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not going down that route. Think I am. Double income, no kids, right? I mean, that's kind of how people think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I hope there aren't any listeners that decide they're not going to get married. That's not the takeaway from what I'm trying to express. The takeaway is just go in eyes wide open and try to be mature about it, where you really think through what you want your life to be like as a married person.
but wouldn't this, if somebody's listening to us, they can blame me, but wouldn't them, if they can't finalize the marriage based on something we said, that's probably a good reason not to get married. That's
Right.
something you got to be 100% all in before you commit to it. And I personally think there's so many great books written after the train wrecks of people's relationship that I think that should be like required reading before you get married because you
Sure.
can see like, oh, damn, I need to really be careful. Like, when things aren't going well, are we in this together? Is this just feel good now? I mean, how many people they spend 5 years and $5 million to plan for a wedding, and when the wedding's over, they're bored with life, right? It's like that's like the highlight of their marriage is their wedding day. That's not how it's supposed to be. But
Mm-mm.
going back to you and your story, I mean, this hopefully it helped people. But going back to your story, David. So now you and your brother, you start an organization. The fiduciary model, is that something you kept, or is it what
Well,
model do you talk about your
we
business
were
now and how you run it?
Yeah, we were at Bear Stearns, and like I said, my brother and I sort of built the business. I say it one client at a time, and little by little, became successful by most people's measure, and we were happy, very happy. I think we had two or three assistants with us when the credit crisis hit in 2008, and J.P. Morgan bought Bear Stearns in the middle of the credit crisis for $2 a share after the stock, I think it dropped it from 144 to 2. And so JP Morgan, so all of a sudden I woke up one day and I was no longer an employee of the firm I loved, but I was an employee of JP Morgan. And when at Bear Stearns, my brother and I and all the other people that were advisors, again, at that point in time, many of them had moved over to what I saw early, which was this fee-based fiduciary-like model for advisory to clients rather than this financial stockbroker type sales approach. At JP Morgan,
Hmm.
even more people had that type of business. So intellectually and the platform that I had access to at JP Morgan was even better than what we had at Bear Stearns. But there was one big difference is it was not an entrepreneurial environment. At Bear Stearns, they allowed us to run our business our way. And their theory was if it's moral, if it's smart, if it's thoughtful, we'll find a way to say yes to doing that kind of business. And you get to decide what that looks like. And it was really a spirit of an entrepreneurial type of spirit. By my nature, I think I'm an entrepreneur. Well, I wake up one day and I work for a big bank. and that was not entrepreneurial at all. And we stayed for a while, but eventually we got really unhappy, and we ended up leaving to start our own company. There's a reason why I had such confidence to be able to leave and start our own company. It's because I had opened a restaurant. We didn't talk about all through high school and college, I had worked in restaurants and I loved the restaurant business. And I didn't think I could have financial security opening a restaurant, but I really wanted to coming out of college. And I'd worked for a bunch of very talented, but not business people, not business-like people in the name of the chef owners that I worked for in high school and college. So I began this finance path. About 15 years into it, I was still at Bear Stearns, and I wrote the business plan for a restaurant. And Bear Stearns, again being entrepreneurial, said, "Yeah, it's okay. Go open that with a partner as long as you're spending the majority of your time on your financial planning practice. Sure, go do that." And we opened. I found a chef partner, and we opened what ended up being 16 years later one of the most successful restaurants in the history of San Francisco. It's a restaurant called Flour and Water, like the ingredients for dough. We spell it flour plus water, but it was the first restaurant. That restaurant has turned into a restaurant company with 7 restaurants now and a consumer packaged goods business and lots of grocery stores, dried pasta, frozen pizza in stores. And we're opening probably 2 to 4 new restaurants a year is our future strategic plan. So I had opened my first restaurant while at Bear Stearns. Now JP Morgan buys us, and I'm like in this bureaucracy, and I'm like, I open restaurants, man. Opening a small financial planning company is going to be easy compared to that. And so I convinced my brother and we had 2 other partners at the time who we made partners in the practice, and our assistants. I convinced everybody to leave JP Morgan and start our own financial planning company, which we did 10 years ago, called One Wealth Advisors. And we left JP Morgan with about 250 million of assets under management, and we have grown that in 10 years to where we now have $1.3 billion in assets under management. And we're a 13-person team with about 400 clients. So there's my professional path in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, and that's incredible, remarkable, right? So, talking to our audience, we all have pain, we all have distractions. We talked about tenacity, we talked about discipline, we talked about structure. What are the things, somebody might be 20 years old listening to this, just starting their career. Somebody might be 50 years old, right? Somebody might be in between. What advice do you have for them to keep moving forward, to stay focused and to achieve that success?
Well, I believe that a career choice should be a balance between do what you love and love what you do. That is to say, I don't care what business you're going to go into or what industry you're going to go into, whatever you're going to do professionally, you will, no matter what it is, I should say almost everybody will inevitably wonder if they've chosen the right path. That is to say, are they really doing what they love? And some people are clearly doing what they can't stand. Okay, well, that's probably an obvious choice. But I think there's love what you do, which is you can find satisfaction and joy, especially if what you're doing, you can look in the mirror and know that you're adding value to human beings, you're adding value to people's lives. You can find a way to love what you do. So I think it's a lot of people say, well, make sure you do what you love. And I would say, okay, yeah, and also love what you do. That is to say, if you have a feeling like you don't certain days, months, love what you do, well, maybe there's some mental gymnastics you need to do to love what you do. And the number one thing I would tell people in life is spend less than you make. Always spend less than you make. Don't borrow money. The only type of debt that I ever would call a good debt is the debt required to buy a home that you're going to live in as a primary residence. That is as opposed to having to pay rent. You got to live somewhere. So maybe that's good debt, a mortgage loan. Otherwise, if you can't afford to buy it with the money you have, don't buy it. Keep your spending less than you're making. If you are always spending less than you're making, you will never have financial anxiety. I mean, it really is that simple. So I find a lot of young people don't want to delay gratification. I blame our culture and our finance industry about where we extend credit to
Mhm.
people too easily, and inevitably it allows people to, not delay the gratification, to get the gratification now, pay for it later. And that's a vicious cycle that, best case scenario, they make so much more money they can eventually pay off their debt. But worst case scenario is it continually, pulls you down emotionally. It's like an anchor.
So I agree 100% with you, David. And the Bible says the borrower is servant to the lender. And our society makes our children our slaves, right? Oh, you need to go out and buy a car. Okay, they get a car payment, their insurance is through the roof, they're spending all their time working just to be chained to that car, right? So right from the bat, like you said, the age they're getting credit, they're being enslaved. But what's interesting is the people I've met in the financial advising space and the stockbroker space usually don't admit that publicly because they're telling their clients something contrary. So I find that super interesting and I respect it a lot because that's not the standard. I remember working at when I was in college. You remember Gateway Computers?
Of course.
I remember Gateway Computers, and back then, computers were like 2 grand on average. A laptop could be up to $9,000. And I remember the financial advisors making $250,000, $300,000 a year back then. They couldn't pay for a laptop or a computer in cash, and their credit was so bad they couldn't finance it. So it blew my mind that the people that were saying they were experts and with money couldn't even buy a computer with cash, let alone finance one. So to hear you say it, obviously you've seen people ruin themselves extending themselves with credit. So when people are starting a business, because I'm with you, other than a home, I don't think you should finance anything. But how
No.
do you recommend people on the entrepreneurial path to not, go into debt, but still start that business?
Equity, sell equity, don't borrow. I have this debate whenever I do any consulting for with entrepreneurs, because I have had formal consulting arrangements with people who've hired me because I've started, and I didn't mention some other businesses I started, so I have a little bit of a reputation, especially in the Bay Area, as a serial entrepreneur, I suppose. And I, first of all, when I agree to take on a prospective consulting client, I ask them a bunch of financial planning questions to see if they're heavily indebted, which you'd think that all I really care about is I'm being hired as a consultant, are you going to pay me? But what I care about is the sustainability of the business that the entrepreneur is going to start. And if the person is on weak financial footing, they're not really in a position to become an entrepreneur. So I would tell anybody who is contemplating being an entrepreneur, make sure your balance sheet is strong and your income is solved, at least for a period of time. If you're indebted, you've got dependents, and you're living paycheck to paycheck, and you think you're going to start a business, and however you capitalize that startup costs for the business, whether it be borrowing or taking an equity, right out of the gate, you are depending upon that brand new business that may not right away have positive cash flow, but you're depending personally on generating cash flow enough to cover your debt payments and your dependents, et cetera. So I would say start there as an entrepreneur. Make sure you have a financial platform to actually be an entrepreneur. But secondly, when you go to finance the business, listen, it is way easier to fill out an SBA loan paperwork or a bank loan or whatever than it is to put together a pitch deck and go out and pitch people to own part of your business. And you can rationalize it by saying, well, if I can borrow money and pay it back, I get to own 100% of the business. And if I have to give somebody equity, then they're going to own a percent of the business forever. Well, that's true. But there's something in my finance world called risk-adjusted returns. And risk-adjusted returns, often it's a mental calculation you're doing. It's not exact, it's imprecise, but you're saying, okay, I'm going to invest in this thing. Let's say it's a US Treasury bond. My risk-adjusted return is 100% equal to my return. That is to say, there's no risk. Treasury bonds are riskless. So if you're going to get 4%, your risk-adjusted return is 4%. Well, if you buy a stock, you hope to make 10% and you understand that there's a risk you'll lose money, right? And so we're always doing this calculation of our risk-adjusted returns. People with wealth, especially extreme wealth, inevitably are going to carve off a portion of their assets and invest it in private individual companies, local companies, call it 5%, sometimes 10% if they're aggressive in that regard. They're going to do it. They're going to find those companies. When they invest in that company, let's just say an entrepreneur listening to this podcast has an idea and they find a rich person that is going to write them a $25,000 or $50,000 check to own a small piece of the company. That person writing the check is going to do a calculation and they're going to say, what's my risk-adjusted return? Now, if it's a restaurant, the risk-adjusted return is I with these projections, I can make 20% a year and I can lose 100% of the investment. My risk-adjusted return, I can do that calculation and I'm comfortable with it. It's calculable and I like it. It's fine for this portion of my net worth. I then ask the question, what is the risk-adjusted return of the entrepreneur who didn't put all of their own capital into the investment or didn't borrow the money? What is the risk-adjusted return of that entrepreneur? And the answer is it's infinite. It's infinite because it's not calculable. There is no risk. You're using other people's capital and they're taking risk on a risk-adjusted return expectation basis that they're comfortable with. And you're taking capital from them very symbiotically, and you have an infinite risk-adjusted return because you can only win. And yes, you've given up a piece. Even though your return is less than if you owned 100%, your risk-adjusted return is incredible. So I always, when I'm launching a business, take in equity investment, or when I'm consulting or when I'm advising, or when anybody talks to me, I'm like, take equity investment, don't borrow money.
Yes, and talk about the pitch process, because for myself and anyone who's gone through raising capital and making money, or utilizing money through investments instead of putting all on your own, it doesn't even matter if you're just trying to sell idea to the company you work for. When you pitch an idea, especially to qualified people, they're going to blow holes in it like crazy. And you're going to learn and gain so much if you're not ready, right?
Yeah, completely. There's a saying that I heard a long time ago that I pretend like I made it up. I certainly didn't, because I think it's been said since the beginning of time. But it is as follows. If you want advice from someone, ask them for money. If you want money from someone, ask them for advice. And I believe what's underneath that philosophy there is that when you ask somebody for money, their guard goes up. They know they're being sold. And it's hard to break through that guard. But if you ask somebody for advice, what you're doing is complimenting them. You're celebrating their intelligence, their humanity. And when their guard is down, they inevitably want to help you. Now, I'm not saying, again, it would be sociopathic if you're not actually seeking somebody's advice and really what you only want is their money. But what I would say to somebody is, first of all, come up with a pitch deck. And I don't care if you're not going to raise money. If you're starting a business that doesn't require outside capital, and there are plenty of those, you still should come up with a business plan that you should turn into a visual pitch deck. I use those pitch decks, which really are strategic business plans for the business, to show to potential employees, to show to landlords who I may lease a space from. When you have a really beautifully fully baked business plan that has turned into a visual pitch deck for your business plan, you have something that has magnetism, it's gravitas. It really makes you look like you have your, you know what together, like you're ready. And then to go to your most trusted network of hopefully rich people and say, hey, I'm starting this business. I would really love to get your advice on what you think of this idea. I'm not here to pitch you on the investment. I want to show this to you. And you do that with the first 5 people or 10 people that you truly want to get their feedback on the business plan, assuming you're trying to raise capital, and on the concept. Let them poke holes in it, evolve the deck, evolve the business. And now you've got even more of a fully baked business plan. Oh, and by the way, it's pretty probable that of those 5 people you asked advice for, a couple of them are going to invest. And the minute somebody invests, they're going to become your ambassador. They're going to start proselytizing, and they're going to tell their friends because they're very excited about it. Plus, they want to validate their decision to have invested with you. And so they actually want subconscious validation. And so they have a psychological vested interest to introduce you to their network and so forth and so on. So does that answer your question?
100%. No, 100%. I just know that a lot of people, they're like, if I share my idea, somebody's going to steal it. And there is some truth to that. You need to be wise. But when you're looking to borrow or, money, like you said, you sign up and now you're in debt. But when you go to someone to pitch them to invest in you and invest in the company, the idea, the process, whatever it is, they need to believe in it. So they're going to point out all the flaws, ladies and gentlemen, that you need to address. And they're probably going to be things you never thought of because they've been there and done that and you haven't yet. So they're going to help you. 15 years of your career and losses are going to be avoided if you just listen, be humble and listen. That's my opinion, David. What do you think?
You got to have the humility, right? There is an intersection of confidence and humility. And I don't think that if you get information that deconstructs an assumption you made about your business, I'll give you a story. My restaurant company, of which I'm co-founder and executive chairman of, we're about to raise $9 million of equity investment for our next round. We've taken our company from 12 million to 26 million in revenue in the last 3.5 years. And everything we've invested, we took in 4 million of capital. We went from 12 to 26 million in revenue with only 4 million of fresh capital. Pretty good. So we're going to raise 9 million.
And how many brands do you have and how many locations? Because that's a massive operation.
It's in essence one brand. We've got currently 7 locations. We're opening a bunch more, but we're scaling the Flour and Water Pizzeria concept. And the Flour and Water brand is attached to both dried pasta and frozen pizza. And that's actually where my story goes. We launched dried pasta first, 4 different shapes in about 60 grocery stores. And the sales in the Bay Area were through the roof. The sales outside of the Bay Area, where we tested it, weren't so strong. And it's a really tough category. We have a board of directors, and our board is like, stop pitching on the pasta. It's okay to keep it if it's not a distraction, but people are not going to invest in your company going forward because of this dried pasta. We launched frozen pizza in 15 grocery stores just as a trial, and we cannot keep it on the shelves. It's selling like crazy. And so this pitch deck, I have a 3-person board of which very seasoned friends, confidants. I mean, these guys are just incredible. And all 3 of them in our alignment. Don't even put dried pasta in your pitch deck. And my instinct is like, no, we care about this. And but guess what we're doing? We're not putting pasta in our pitch deck. And but we're very confident. We are amongst the more successful restaurateurs in the Bay Area and across the country. Like we're really good. And so we're confident in that, but we have the humility to take this advice. So that's a real world in the moment example because we are putting this pitch deck together as I talk to you.
Yeah, and ladies and gentlemen, David and I are kind of smiling and laughing, and there's humor in this. But his humility to listen to his board could keep him from huge failure and losses because he might be passionate about this pasta, but that those other three individuals see something that's not registering his brain. He's protected. Or he might be the visionary that invented the greatest thing in the world and they don't see it yet and they're holding him back. But when you have so much on the line, you need to really weigh, is it worth the risk? And like you said, at this point, it's not worth the risk. We're going to shelf it for now and move on, right?
Yeah, well, the conclusion was the conclusion we made in that example was that investors who are going to invest in us with the type of capital we're raising is likely to be institutional investors. It's no longer wealthy people who are going to write us $50 and $100,000 checks. It's likely going to be larger institutions that are going to write us $1 million plus checks. And they are seasoned investors, seasoned professional investors. They're not going to be interested in the pasta story because the pasta story is just it's going to the extent that dried pasta is going to succeed, it's going to succeed over a generation, not over 12 or 24 months. These investors, they want to see hockey stick like growth. And their point is if the investor feels that we're focusing too much energy in something that is not going anywhere fast, that we're not going to be a company they're interested in investing in. And we do want to grow fast. And so we want our business plan to be consistent with what we're pitching investors. So we're not getting rid of pasta. We're just not going to be tripling down on it and focusing on it and allowing it to be a distraction. So.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. So, yeah, I just hope, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're hearing, continue the conversation with David after the podcast is over. But all of us have challenges and different struggles and different biases and all different passions and distractions. So it's, the Bible says a false balance is abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. So we got to make sure we're balanced. And that's what David's been talking about this entire show. So thank you. So David, I got to ask you, between your birth then and today, we kind of even already talked about where you're headed next, but anything that you want to share, whether it's about your life directly or advice to listeners, anything else we missed before we wrap up the show?
I just emphasize again being in the service of others. If I think about my financial planning company, it's pretty obvious how we now see that we're in the service of our clients. And we've had the same clients we started 30 something years ago, and we rarely lose a client and they stay with us. And it must be because we're adding value to their lives. And I think rightfully believe that our consumer packaged goods products for the restaurant company and the restaurants we open are delicious, and we are certainly in the service of them literally from a hospitality perspective. But I also see myself in the service of my friends and my family. Every day I wake up and I really think about what can I do to help this person live a happier, more peaceful life. And I don't care who it is. And that I really deeply believe that that is what we all ideally should be doing. I'm not a very religious person, and you've referred to your religion and God. And I really, whatever the framework we need to get to the point where I am listening to Jesus's message, right? My goodness, like even though I'm not religious, I absolutely believe there's a consistency across all of the great religions and the great philosophies. And I don't think there are too many of them out there that talk about anything other than be good to people,
Yeah.
be good for people.
So now, what are you doing with your great success? Do you have a plan with your employees and your people that you're like, let's give back or let's take part of our profits and put it into something? Or do you just do that privately at your discretion? Like, do you have a formal business? Is that part of your formal business model? Or how do you handle that?
Yes and yes. So my financial planning company, we currently give 1% of profits to philanthropy. And we do that. We have a 13-person team and we match anytime clients give, I shouldn't say anytime, many times when clients give to a charity, we know about it because they're doing their charitable giving through us. And when we see it, we often we don't do a complete match, but we match something from our own company's profits. And then when a team member gives to an organization they care about, we do the same thing. We will match for them. And so that's what we're doing with the financial planning company. We have an aspiration to give 1% of sales. And we're getting closer to feeling comfortable that we can do that. Currently, we do 1% of profits, but 1% of sales would be a much bigger number. And then with my restaurant company, it's interesting. We talked earlier about kids, and estate planning is a big part of what we do in the financial planning company. And so therefore, I'm not one of those cobblers, kids has no shoes. Like I have a really good estate plan. And my in my estate plan, my equity in my restaurant company that I started, like I said, 16 years ago and is now turning into be worth something. In my estate plan, all of my equity goes to a nonprofit organization that my restaurant company started. And I believe that the restaurant industry is very dependent upon immigrants. We don't have to get into the politics of illegal versus legal immigrants or any of that. We're dependent upon immigrants, full stop, whether without that political debate about illegal versus illegal. And these are people who I believe, as I like to say, our restaurant company is built on the backs of these incredibly hardworking immigrants. And many of them are not financially secure and they suffer, they have food safety issues. And so we're that nonprofit's very interested in maybe trying to chip away a little bit about that, helping immigrant restaurant workers with food safety. But the one thing I want to do, and this is to teach people to fish for themselves, I would like to ever increasingly start investing in legal immigrants. I could say that because there's going to be a business owner, legal immigrant restaurants to start up. Because here's the thing. When I opened my first restaurant, I knew instinctively, because of my business background, that I was going to need ample capital to the tune of $600,000. And so I went and pitched, as I said earlier, 10 people who gave me $600,000. And we opened our first restaurant. And we have since then distributed back millions of dollars from that 600 grand. So they've made a lot of money and they're very happy. Here's the point though. I knew it was going to take 600 grand and I knew I didn't want to work at the restaurant. And meaning I didn't want to physically be a laborer at the restaurant. Of course, I had a day job and I wanted to be an owner and a strategist and not a laborer. And what I believe is a lot of immigrants, when they see a path to opening their own restaurant, they don't understand that they're going to need ample capital to not be buying themselves a job. That is to say, they're going to open up their little Italian restaurant or the little Mexican restaurant or the little Indonesian restaurant or Chinese restaurant or whatever it is, and they're inevitably going to be the chef or the general manager, and they're going to open it with too little capital, and they're going to be on this treadmill that they never get off of. And I believe that's a cultural thing and an intellectual thing. And I would like for the next part of my life to begin to chip away at bridging the gap for some of these immigrant potential aspirational restaurant entrepreneurs so they can understand that they do, how do you raise money from investors? What is enough capital? And I want to teach people that.
And that's a lesson people need to hear. Even not even immigrants, people within America, they just are told, work hard, work hard, work hard. And they do work hard, but they're not working smart and they're not working efficiently, or they're working towards things that don't bring return. And it's just really wasting time. You know what I mean? So
yeah, well, think about it though. As an entrepreneur, what you don't realize is if you're an entrepreneur and you work in the business you started, you have two jobs now. You have the job as an owner, which it absolutely requires work, right? P&Ls and legal and HR and go on and on about the stuff that requires work. That has nothing to do with the operation of whatever business it is. And
yeah.
a lot of people find themselves, they don't realize I just started this business and I have two jobs. I have the job that I'm doing at the business, and I have the job that I'm doing as an owner. What I would say is you're on a treadmill if you do both jobs forever, and you need to get off that treadmill and do the job as an owner and empower other people to do the operational work, which will allow you to scale. It'll get you off of that treadmill.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like I actually think things are getting so, you can have the best restaurant, but if you can't market it, nobody's coming. You can be the best physician, but if you can't market, nobody's coming. You can be the best janitor, but if people don't know, you're not getting a job. So I think we're so ingrained in a marketing centric society, and that is a full-time job in itself. So there's just so much to actually following your passion and starting a business and seeing success that, yeah, I believe in outsourcing completely. And to have two jobs, that would be a dream at times, right? Like you got 18 jobs from talking to you today.
But I don't actually, because really I have one job in my financial planning company. I exist for the purpose of nurturing and supporting my business partners in that company and our clients. And in my restaurant company, I exist for the purpose really of supporting and nurturing the executive team in the restaurant company. It's a 300 plus employee company with a 9-person executive team. My job is to nurture my 9-person executive team to help them with their careers, their lives. So I actually really see myself as having one job, strangely.
Well, and I misspoke. I'm sorry. I meant if you were doing it the wrong way, you'd have 18 jobs. So yes, so that's
Yeah, when you
very,
start a business, right, it's one person wearing 10 hats, and when you grow, one person's wearing 5 hats, and you eventually want to grow to the point where you hopefully are only wearing one hat, and that's leading.
well, it's been fantastic talking to you today, David. Is there anything that we missed in your story? Or if someone wanted to reach out and continue the conversation, maybe hire you for consulting, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, I have a website that's www dot. What you don't have to do www. That's an old guy. That's the way of saying
It's
it's
just habit.
Dave,
It's habit.
yeah, right. It's davidsteele.xyz, DAVIDSTEELE dot XYZ, davidsteele.xyz. And there's links to the businesses that I've created that I operate, and also I'm on the board of a few other interesting companies in the restaurant and the music industry as well. And you can see all the stuff I do there.
Yeah, and of course, ladies and gentlemen, we'll put those in the show notes as normal. But David, it's been great speaking with you today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, like our slogan says, listen, do, repeat for life. Don't just listen to the great advice David gave you today, but do it. Repeat, form those great habits. Repeat it each day so you can have a great life in this world, but more importantly, an eternity to come. So I'm David Pasqualone. This is our remarkable friend, David Steele. David, thank you again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we love you and we'll see you in the next episode. Ciao. Ladies and gentlemen, I sincerely hope this show has inspired you. The whole purpose of the Remarkable People podcast is to inspire you, to motivate you into action, to help you have an even better life, to overcome things you've not yet been able to overcome, or to grow to the next level that you never thought possible. And all of this, not just to benefit you in this world, but to have you come to a relationship with God where it grows every day stronger, and not just this world is blessed, but your eternity is blessed. And we sincerely want to do just that and to glorify God. And we hope with this episode, we accomplish that. If we did, please let me know. It's great to be encouraged and to spread the word to our remarkable guests that it helped in your life. If we didn't, let me know. Write me an email. You can go to davidpasqualone.com, go to our contact us page, and let me know what you think. I got tough skin. Let it rip. Anything you can think of to make this a better podcast, to help you grow and to glorify God, I'm in. So that's it. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Thank you for sending us feedback. If we can help you in any way, let us know. And if you can spread the word about the Remarkable People podcast, share the episode to your friends, your family on social media, it would be a huge honor and blessing. Again, I'm not trying to be the most famous podcast in the world for my benefit. I truly want a podcast that's the best podcast in the world to help as many people as we can to have a better life, come to know Christ, to grow in the Lord, and to have that salvation so they can be with God in peace and joy in eternity. And right now we're together on this earth, so let's do everything we can to work together and help each other grow. Like the Bible says, love the Lord thy God as a first commandment, and the next commandment is to love thy neighbor as thyself. So let's do it together. I'm David Pasqualone. I love you, not as much as God loves you, but if I can help you in any way, just ask. And again, please share this with your friends and family so we can help them too. Ciao. See you in the next episode.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.